Dearly beloved. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Wrong announcement. We are gathered here.
Oh, no.
To discuss
a couple things.
A variety of topics.
Yeah.
Including Hagerty's
Road of the Year. First ever Road of the Year.
On the Carmudgeon show.
Which is part of the
Hagerty's.
Road of the Year podcast network. We're also going to talk about an ND3 Miata.
There is an ND3 coming.
Yep. And we are also going to talk about
a variety of cars that were designed by or responsible by some guy.
Don't tell him.
German Austrian guy.
There's an Austrian German guy who's, when he called the bank and they're like, "We need your mother's name for security purposes," he would say Porsche.
Yes.
And more. Lots of cool stuff. Long episode. So let's jump right into it. However, if you like our content and would like to support it, you should join the Hagerty Podcast Network. No.
Wait, no.
See, it's not so easy, is it? Like, I always watch this back and I'm like, God, I fucked it up again. And then, now I'm going to make you do it. I'm just going to sit here. I'll clap when you're done.
Hagerty Drivers Club, which offers free roadside assistance and flatbed towing for all of your classic cars.
It includes.
Not
offers.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, offering means it's an option. So start over again.
No. I will do no such thing. A subscription to the award-winning magazine.
Which picked the road.
Unlimited access, which picked the road of the Hagerty podcast, Road of the Drivers Club.
2024 Drivers Club, yeah.
And the unlimited access to the valuation tool.
Yep.
And discounts on miscellaneous items and the clap.
VFP special events. Bye.
Are you still clapping? Hello.
We've been here for quite some time.
Oh, greetings.
While you're sucking down your gummies.
Well, I wanted to have them all consumed by the time we started.
I hope there's weed in there. So, I hope they're like THC Welch's fruit gummies.
Spiked gummies.
That'd be awesome.
This is gonna get
gradually
more silly,
dumber.
Which is kind of what our episodes do anyway.
Depends. This one's after lunch, so we'll be snoring in 3 minutes.
Silly snoring. Snilly snoring.
Snilly snoring? Oh,
yes,
snozberries.
It's beginning to look a lot like it's May.
It's not Christmas.
It's not Christmas. It's not near. Make sure you do all your shopping. Happy Black Friday.
Did you see that Jake got me tea that's not tea?
Berry power?
You're
having berries too. Mine are just gummy shaped.
Oh, okay.
Yours are liquid.
I'm trying to figure out what in this shit this is.
Does it taste like toothpaste?
It tastes exactly like toothpaste.
Oh.
This is liquid brown Arm & Hammer, whatever, baking soda, whitening, whatever. Look at how pretty my teeth are.
Okay. Well, those who are listening will not be able, sadly.
Just imagine the whitest teeth you've ever seen and then yellow them and then they look like mine.
Okay. Too much coffee. This episode has some sort of thrust to it, I'm sure. Some kind of topic.
Thrush, isn't that like a tongue infection or something?
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard this. But that's not what I said.
Thrush? I don't know, some medical condition. Well, we're supposed to talk about Hagerty did a Road of the Year. Which
did they build a lot of new roads this year? Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
You're going to get us in actual trouble. Because, of course, I find out, we did a Road of the Year. And, okay, that's a really interesting thing. But, my immediate reaction is you can't do an of the year contest for things that don't change. It's the new car of the year.
Maybe there was a mudslide.
There were 3 of them, I think, apparently.
Yes.
So,
the Hagerty Road of the Year. That's why it's the Road of the Year. It's changing. It's new. It's new and improved, or just new.
Just look at that camera and seriously say the reason why. Just deliver that whole segment. I'm just going to about the Road of the Year and why it's that. In all seriousness,
the Road of the Year is the Road of the Year because it's new and improved, but mostly just new. It's not improved at all. It's actually disproved, unimproved. Impaired?
Just dig yourself. Impaired. Yeah. So the guys over the magazine came up with the idea of giving a road of the year, and then came up with a bunch of arbitrary, I guess they're not arbitrary, sensical like qualifications, like it can't be paved like shit, which means we won't like it. And then it can't be like just an out and back. It's got to be something that connects you somewhere.
It has to go to a place.
It has to be within a couple hours of a major metropolitan area, which I guess makes sense because if you have to drive 14 hours to do a 1 hour,
it's not the road of the year if you have to do that. It's a road.
It could be a road of next year. They could change the criteria. Yeah. But anyway, it was Route 33 in Ojai. That one
starting in Ojai at the southern terminus and then going up to East Nowhere in the Central Valley or wherever it actually goes.
It says it in the article. Aaron Robinson read the article. He's amazing. So
yeah,
I'm sure
it's well written.
You have personal experience with 33?
Oh yeah, we've done it together.
Rallies.
I've done it at least twice, maybe thrice.
Does anyone say thrice?
I just did. Do we need a dictionary to one of these?
Does anyone else say thrice?
I mean, it was done slightly for the sake of my own personal amusement.
Oh.
Which,
is amusing you.
I'm amused.
Are you amused? Okay.
I am amused. It's working.
Yes, 33 I've done a whole bunch of times because it's north of LA and that's sort of where that's trending home. I just don't, all of the roads sort of over there combined into one. LA's got a lot of really great roads north of the city, but I've sort of spent more time a little bit further east, like above.
Oh, like Angeles Crest and
Upper Big Donda,
the one that's right next to it, the good one, Glendora Mountain Road.
Highway 2 or whatever. Yeah, but that's
a good one.
That's there's some good stuff up there, but 33 goes on for quite some time and then connects you to I-5, which
via like
home.
Taft.
Which
we had a low point on a rally there looking for lunch. It was a place where we sat down for like an hour and never got served anyway.
I was too hungry. I passed out.
Yes, you blocked it out from the trauma. Highway 33, I also, it is the place where I definitely had the biggest moment I've ever had on a public road ever in a car. Was on Highway 33 as well. So it's not my road of the year, nor was it the road of the year with the year that I did that, which was 2009.
Sponsored by Depends Undergarments.
Yeah.
What happened? What'd you do?
And my body shop.
It
was just the front valence. But I did spin. I spun on Highway 33 in 2009.
In what?
My 911.
Of course. And why?
Insufficient skill. I guess
that doesn't
too many miles per hour. Well, that was 2009. Some years ago, I've maybe improved. Although I had already been to SCCA competition school. I mean, if famous last words, if there had been more road, I would have been able to save it. But
if that goddamn curve wasn't there, I would have spun my car around it.
There's a wonderful Italian saying that translates to, "If my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a tram."
That one winds up on all kinds of like TikTok things. There's a guy, there's an Italian guy.
Yeah, but it's common. It is genuinely used. Or you'd say wheelbarrow, tram or wheelbarrow. Anyway, if
that with wheelbarrow is a little bit different because isn't that a sexual position?
Oh my God. Well, also wheelbarrows only have one wheel. And so the saying is if she had wheels, but she wouldn't be a wheelbarrow if she had wheels.
She'd be his wheelsbarrow.
Sure. Anyway, so I had a moment on Highway 33. I was too fast, not enough grip, and of course at 911 you have to commit. And
so how did you hit the front valence on the second spin around?
That's right.
Really?
Yes.
For the record, I'm not still sick,
except for the whole part where you are.
But it's not real. Okay, look, you're catching us. We're batching a bunch of episodes.
Well, yes, and this one and the next one are related to each other, so we wanted to do them in.
But also last week, so we're doing these out of order. Too much
inside baseball.
Yeah, I know, but like what I don't want like to hear on the internet is like Cammisa has the AIDS or something. Like just like I'm not.
What is it? 1993? Do people still say that?
Oh, okay. And I don't know. I just don't want to hear. I was talking about thrush, which is, a tongue thing. No, I'm not sick for fucking 6 weeks. I'm sick for we recorded 6 days ago?
Yes.
And I'm still sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I should say I'm sick again because it's more like it comes in anyway.
So that's my predominant. So I don't really like Highway 33, if I'm honest.
The only thing that I remember about 33 is we had a wonderful guy that worked with us at Road and Track who had a very terrible accident on 33. Not in a car. He got out of the car and he fell off a bridge. And it was very, very, very bad. And he's very alive, which is very not supposed to happen. He was
based on how many feet he fell and how long he was in the river.
Yeah, but actually the river saved his life because he fell, I think it was 42 feet, head down onto a rock, and then was fully submerged other than his mouth and his nose. So he didn't drown, but was immediately put into hypothermia, which is what saved his life. So, I mean, amazing. Drive like an asshole on the road. Like, I'm not saying he did, but like,
one could.
It's been their Porsche.
A hypothetical
thing on, because it is a really good road. Yeah. Drive like an asshole. You get out of your car to take a picture and off of a bridge and almost kill yourself that way. But thank heavens and the stars he is here today. But I hear the name Route 33 in Ohio and I just get
same, but for different and less severe reasons.
Yeah. But I'm not going to, I mean, they can vote their road of the year all they want.
I mean, it's a good road. There's a reason why we have found ourselves on it repeatedly, and one does. It's fast.
A lot of the LA roads are. They're really
that's why I like the Northern California really tight twisty stuff. But if you have something with not much ground clearance or something with just a metric ton of horsepower where you want to exercise it, then the roads we have that we like are not suited to that. But, road of the year for sort of a mainstream road consumer, I would say, with people with cars that have horsepower, which, we try and avoid.
The way that Aaron wrote the whole thing is it's kind of a touristy guide. Like, stay here, do this, do that, whatever. It's pretty interesting.
Yes.
I would do that in a Miata. And now I can tell you that I just drove the ND3
That was
Miata.
a very nice transition. Yeah. How long were you contemplating that one?
3 weeks. I don't know how long it's been. So yesterday, definitely not weeks ago, I drove ND3, which is...
I didn't even know there was an ND3 coming.
It's kind of like ND 2 point something.
Like they did with the NC. The only difference between the NC 2 and 3, which a lot of people call the NC 2.5, was like they changed the shapes of the fascia and some of the color choices, and the grille has a bar going across it, and they added the club and changed the wheel options and configuration around. No really meaningful changes. Not changes. Like that between the 1 and 2 where they did meaningful changes.
This one has definitely not sick. Substantive changes. New steering rack.
Oh, tell us about the new rack.
So hold on. I'm not. Stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. What was in your? I asked you. Those were gummies.
I asked you a legitimate question, Jason. Tell us about your new rack.
Okay.
On your
voluptuous.
Great.
Perky.
An improvement.
The rack was meant apparently for less friction, but also to actually reduce response directly off center. This is something that anyone else did, we would scream about. Like, no, don't do that. However, it appears that every change to ND, since ND, then NDRF, which got some rear suspension tuning changes, to ND2, to now ND3, has conspired to eliminate what Mazda was adamant was a characteristic, and we all felt it was a flaw, which was that floppy rear end, right? Mm-hmm. So when ND came out, Mazda's goal was to make the car feel very alive and like it wanted to play, right? But it was ultimately... I hate to say this because I love a lot of the people.
It came at the expense of limit behavior.
It wasn't even that. It was.
I mean, I don't like the limit behavior of that car.
Well, a puppy is fine for 5 minutes, and it was like a hyperactive puppy on cocaine. It was just, I want to go over here, I want to go over there, and so I understood the philosophy, which was when you turn in there, Mazda wanted a secondary reaction at the rear of the car where the rear would then roll over and then so you could sort of almost lose your way or ski, act like a skier through a slalom or corners or whatever. It's a lovely idea in city driving. But what wound up happening in any performance driving at all is you would turn in and the back would flump over so quickly that it would upset the car. And so the first thing you and I and everyone else who did that drove an ND1 or ND2 was remind ourselves and yell at ourselves to slow down our hands. Because if you turn in quickly, you get this big roll moment at the rear that would then upset it. And the
And
ND.
if you do it enough, then you get bump stops, and then things get really spicy.
Well, right. I mean, I have spun one car on a public road. I'm trying to think if I'm full of shit.
Me too.
Well,
As we know.
911.
That's the only car that's the only time I've ever spun on a public road.
I spun my Corolla when I was 18 or 19. I hit a bump in the middle of a corner and it just, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm facing the right way again. Let me get the fuck out of here before someone hits me. And I spun, I'm trying to think, I know I spun once in the snow when I was trying to do shit, but I spun that ND that was our buddy's car a couple years ago when we were up in the mountains, and we were hopping back in between his NC2 and his ND1, back and forth. And I got out of the NC and just
ND2.
ND2.
They were both
two.
twos.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. I got out of the NC having just done this like hill climb in it.
Yeah.
And I got in the same road. And the first corner, I went in the ND. I just turned in and just lost it, like looped the car in the middle of the road. Thank God, didn't hit anything. And that was the discussion where you and I just crucified this poor friend of ours. Like, get rid of this fucking ND.
After we got out of the respective cars.
Yeah, we both agreed it wasn't close. Although, in fairness, he had suspension done to his suspension work done on his NC.
Yeah, but the NC out of the box is very
wonderful,
much consistent with that sort of button down feel.
ND1 and ND2 were just way too floppy, and part of that was also so it was a roll stiffness and a spring rate issue at the rear, as far as suspension engineer Jason is concerned, and suspension engineer Jason doesn't speak suspension engineer, not actually one, plays one on television. The other issue was that steering rack. So you had an immediate reaction without a really clear sense of straight ahead. So when we talk about sense of straight ahead, how you quantify that is you look at an effort curve on how much effort it takes to turn the wheel in either direction. And what I find the best steering systems have is a very discrete V in that effort curve. Mm-hmm. So the wheel wants to return to center, it snaps to center and then stays there. And anytime you're moving in either direction, you're encountering a sudden big increase in effort. Not only was it a sort of U-shaped curve, but it almost fell over in that you turn it a little and it wanted to go more. And you turn it a little bit, and I sort of imagine trying to...
bad for smoothness.
Exactly. If you sort of balance a ball bearing on the top of a rounded surface like this, it wants to go in either way.
It's an unstable system.
Exactly. And this rack changes that completely.
Really?
It is, especially at higher speeds, 50, 60, and 90, 100 miles an hour highway speeds, really, really, really clear V in the center of that, and a reluctance to change direction, which on, excuse me, any other car would be a bad thing, but on an ND was what it needed. Mm-hmm. So now when you turn in, that you're turning the wheel and it's fighting you, so it's not falling over and encouraging you to turn in more. And then the diff is apparently also new and more progressive in its locking. Mm. And what I immediately found is on a back road, it still leans over. And when the back of that car leans, the car still turns in a little bit more. So it must have some sort of some suspension movement that allows it to actually turn. But it's not happening suddenly. And then you go to the power and it doesn't immediately kick itself sideways. It will if you ask it to. And it still does more than most, but it's much more of a piece cohesive.
Less sketchy, more reassuring.
Yeah. Much closer to NC. Still assy, still floppy, still like softly suspended that it deals with back roads. It doesn't really care about bumps. Still a riot. Still a great car.
So improvements only, no disprovements.
Let me see. This one had the Recaros in it, and I don't remember ever being uncomfortable in those Recaros before. But the car is starting to feel small to me, and I don't know if that's just because I keep getting bigger and older. But this one in particular, for whatever reason, the left thigh bolster just really hurt my leg after an hour, which I haven't noticed before.
I have no recollection. Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time in that.
Yeah.
In the ND2 club with the same seats.
I've done thousands of miles in NDs, and Miatas overall. Never noticed that. But the big issue for me is, first of all, if I bought one of these cars, I would do an exhaust that I would buy before I even got the car home. Like the exhaust would be waiting at my house. It's unconscionably quiet. I'm sure there are reasons for it. I'm sure it's drive-by noise or whatever. I don't care. It needs some acoustic personality. And the fact that there is now a larger, that's one of the other upgrades that they did, other than taillights and headlights, is a larger touchscreen for CarPlay and whatnot.
Which you still cannot use when you are in motion.
Like so close, Mazda. You have the spinny thing. When you're stopped, you can use it as a touchscreen. When you're moving, you're constantly fighting to try to get CarPlay to work with a spinny controller that it just was never done. It's fucking dumb at this point. Like, I understand Mazda thinks that it's safer not to use a touchscreen. Let it go, bitches. Let it go. You're wrong.
Okay, so we have 4 changes now. We have head and tail lights, we have differential, we have steering rack. That's 5 changes, sorry, and the larger screen. Anything else?
Apparently the instrument cluster is different. I didn't notice. I was told. I don't know.
Okay.
It's still the amazing, like, you can put the top up and down 3 times in 2 seconds. It's great. It's a Miata. It's fucking, new color. I think you can get a tan interior. Whatever. I don't care.
One with a tan interior.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe it's a different tan. More different.
I was told this was a new color and that tan was available, and I'm positive I had a Miata a year ago that was exactly the same color and with a tan interior. So I don't ask any questions. All I know is I drove it. I put 330 miles on it. It was magic. It got 31 miles per gallon no matter what the fuck I did with it. Put a smile on my face, and I would take it on Route 33, which is Hagerty's 2024 Road of the Year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's it. We're done.
Okay.
We can go home now.
Okay. Wait a minute. This hasn't been very much of an episode. What's up with the... Who's that on your shirt?
Did you just... Oh, I couldn't. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to show off my shirt. This... Sorry, I should talk into the microphone. This is the Godvater, which is decidedly not how you say the Godfather in German. But I did take the Godfather movie logo, change this around a little bit, and I changed the Godfather to Ferdinand Piëch.
Oh, why did you do that?
Well, so that I could then list some of his achievements, like a Quattro, a Phaeton, a TDI, XL1, W8, W12, W16, Procon 10.
Was ist das?
I'll tell you in a second. Porsche 917, Veyron und Clean-Diesel.
Allegedly.
With a smiley face.
Yes.
See, look at that. I did this because I want to talk to you about the Piëchisode.
We owe the public a Piëchisode after like 3 years.
It's got to be, right? Well, we mentioned that we previously did it.
Yes.
And if this episode comes out when it's supposed to, when I will definitely not be sick still, then in a couple of days, the Piëch...
Yes, today's May 6th, I think.
If you want to go into that much detail, then you want to really show how bad we are? Yeah, okay. Today,
Thursday, May 9th.
There will be a Piëchisode on the Hagerty main YouTube channel. And you will have a link, which I could probably put in, to purchase this gorgeous shirt.
It is a true work of art.
But you didn't even know what Pro Content was.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to find out in a Piëchisode.
No, I didn't talk about it.
Well, not that one. Next week's we might talk about it. Or this week's.
Well, this
Carmudgeon.
week, I think this week we should talk about the cars of the Piëchisode.
Okay.
Procon 10 was a fucking amazing thing, BTW, which was a cable system. God, let me see if I can get this right. There was a cable that connected the engine...
Leg bone.
To the thigh bone, to the chicken bone. That connected the engine to the seatbelt.
You mean like a throttle cable?
No, it was a safety feature that, God, Pro-Con 10, it stood for something. Like protracted, contracted, whatever the fuck it was. Either way, it was a pretensioner and force limiting device that would pretension the belt when you hit when the engine started to move back in its mounts. Because in an Audi layout, obviously, this was an Audi.
The engine is the farthest forward thing.
Yeah, it's in front of the bumper. Yeah. So when the front of the engine hits and starts to move back, it pretensioned your seatbelt. And it was apparently more reliable and less expensive than a conventional pretensioner. I could get that totally wrong. It's been years since I've thought about Procon 10, but there used to be stickers on the back of Audis that would say Procon 10.
Oh, this was a thing that ended up in all these cars.
Yeah.
Oh.
You didn't know that?
No.
Maybe it's just a Europe. Hold on. Let me ask again. Derek, there's something you don't know?
Yes.
Wow.
Tell me about it. Oh, you just did.
I just did.
Okay.
So now you know it. Yeah, there used to be, like on the back window, it used to say Pro Content on all the Audis. Maybe it's just a European market thing.
Name.
It was engineering, not marketing. The Germans.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, Quattro is a much better name.
Quattro is an amazing name. Quattro is probably the best name ever because it's not only exotic sounding, but it's also
informative.
Informative. Okay. So we have promised we are not going to talk about Ferdinand Piëch or his life or his achievements in this particular episode, but we are going to talk about the cars that were part of the Piëchisode.
So this is, I guess, a bit of a spoiler alert because the episode hasn't come out yet, but you'll now all know what cars are in it.
Do you want to start? Should we do
Let's do this chronologically.
Chronologically? Is that like 1980s blue neon movie like?
Yeah, but everything's black and it's on a grid. You can only 45 degrees. No, not allowed. 45 degrees is not allowed.
What the fuck was in those gummies? That was not just fruit juice.
Okay, 1973 Porsche.
Okay, so I chose this particular Porsche not because Piëch drove it or had anything to do with it, but because we're not supposed to talk about him. We're not going to talk about why we chose the Carrera 27 RS or even a long hood at all. But I finally got to drive a Carrera 2.7 RS.
I think this was my 12th one that I have driven. I think it'll be more interesting if you share your observations.
Okay, so Carrera 27 RS.
Let's do a little history background lesson.
Is it me or did he just say, I think this would be interesting if you talk and then
about how it drives, but I figure we should get the context of the car
totally
first.
Kidding. You please do, because there's a cool story behind about it. They didn't think anyone would buy it and sell it, and you know that story, and I don't.
Correct.
So I'm just going to sit over here and sniffle.
Previously, how do we do this without talking about Ferdinand Piëch?
No, you don't need to.
Okay. Previously, cars were being raced by Porsche, and they'd been racing all kinds of stuff. They had a David and Goliath reputation. Small 4-cylinder cars that were running against big 12-cylinder Ferraris and whatever else, Maseratis that were not 12 cylinders, but were certainly more displacement-y, and Aston Martins and
Displacement-y?
Displacement-y, displacementular, whatever.
Displacementular.
However you prefer. And so in order to win Le Mans, Porsche, because of someone, did a very expensive clean sheet designed race car called the 917, and they did in fact win Le Mans, and then the regulation, it ran for 2 or 3 years, and the regulations changed, and Porsche was like, shit, that costs a lot of money. We did win Le Mans, but Ferry Porsche was cheap, and he was like, I don't think that was worth all that money, so we're not going to replace this race car with another one to meet the new regulations, which reduced the displacement limit from, I don't know what it was before, 5 or more, maybe it's unlimited liters, to 3 liters. So it basically outlawed the existing car. So they said, well, we have to race something. I guess let's do the best we can with the 911 because we don't spend the money to develop a new clean sheet car. So they did the best they could with the 911 and came up with the RSR, which was the racing version of the Carrera RS. And part of the rules of racing that car was that they had to build at least 500 units to homologate the car for road use that had some of the aerodynamic and engine changes and whatever else that in order to go racing with the car. The first outing of the car, it was actually not homologated yet. They hadn't built the 500 car, so they ran it as a prototype and then won overall in a 911 against all these prototype cars.
If there's no better example of how Porsche can when Porsche's firing on all cylinders, can shit on the rest of the industry.
Yeah. So that's what happened when the RSR debuted in 73. And then they ran it as a GT car, as a production-based car after homologation was completed. But they had to build 500 of them. Porsche engineers, or actually I guess they were executives really, were concerned about not being able to sell enough of the cars because they would be a little bit more expensive. And, they had more performance, but, they thought it would be a tough sell. So they made a bunch of executives at the company agree to buy them so that they could get the 500 cars sold, which of course is the exact opposite now of what any time Porsche comes out with a limited production, high performance variant. And then, of course, they sold so well that immediately 500 were done. This came out in Paris in 72, I think it's October or November, probably October. And then they sold 500 of them, and they were like, oh, okay, so we'll make 500 more of them. And then they sold out, and then they made 500 more of them, and all in, they made 1,580 of these things.
So they're 1,580 Carrera
RS
2.7 RS is the full name.
Yep.
They were all 1973.
Yes.
And they all had duck bill spoiler, like ducktail.
It was a delete option. You could actually order it without. You'd almost never see them, but they were made that way, and you could order it that way.
And 2.7 liter, obviously.
Instead of 2.4.
It
was actually 2342, I think, but this is the German thing, so they call it a 2.4. So
because it's per hundreds, per
a fraction of the next 100.
Right.
So it went from officially 2.3 liters to 2.7 liters. They made 210 horsepower instead of 190 horsepower. They took a bunch of weight out. Yeah, it's 20 horsepower increase.
That's not much.
No, it's not much, especially for the portion of the displacement that represents. Yeah. They lightened the car considerably, lighter weight structure, thinner glass. Depends. You could order the car in basically two trims. There was the lightweight trim. They made 200 of those. There were 17 RSHs, which are
Hertz
homologated. Yeah, the GT350H. They were H for homologation. Those cars are even more stripped. They don't have passenger sun visors or glove box doors or. So those are obviously super valuable. And then they made the remaining 1580 minus 200 minus 17 were all the so-called touring, which is the origin of the touring name that is now used on the GT3. So anyways, it's lighter. It's one of those cars where you're like, it changed a fair number of things, but not like that much. And then you drive it and you're like, oh wow, it's really quite different. I mean, it's the power of reducing weight.
Right. So, okay, the car that we drove was touring.
Yes, and it's one of 4 built in that color.
Beautiful color.
Jade green.
Absolutely stunning. I have been told by you repeatedly over the years that 2.7 RS is the car that the 911, the air-cooled 911 that I will like the most, and the car that most accurately represents what we all think when we dream of what a 911 will drive like. Just one question mark. This one does have aftermarket suspension, correct?
Yeah, and larger than normal wheels or tires, I guess.
Tires, okay. So other than the suspension, which seemed a little bit stiff, which unnecessarily or unnaturally stiff, again, on the roads that we drove, which were terrible, that engine is a fucking masterpiece.
This is why everyone freaks out over MFI.
Oh my God. So it's amazing that mechanical fuel injection on a car that's that cammy can function. So 2,000 RPM, it'll stumble a little bit if you give it too much throttle, almost carburetor-like. It's a little bit happy, but from 2,500 to 7,200 RPM, it pulls. And it builds and 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 builds. And Randy was driving it once and hit the rev limiter. I mean, you don't typically hit, I don't even know what the limiter is, but probably 7,400 RPM. You typically don't hit limiters in old cars because they're so dead above. Wow, that thing pulled. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like carburetors.
Too quiet.
You think
that one,
so?
yeah, I thought it was a little bit. I think we live in a world where cars are just so loud that you kind of expect homologation race car is just going to be blowing my ears off, dirty, filthy.
This one had the street exhaust. I did a BTS probably 4 years ago at this point on a car that had the sport muffler. The sport muffler is funny because it has 2 exits that come out the middle of the back of the car, and then one that comes out on the side of the muffler at below the taillight, basically. And there are caps that are removable, and you can install and remove caps in accordance with how much noise you want.
Right.
And so, of course, the owner of this car has all 3 caps off. Obviously, you want one of them open. Normally, if it would sound basically like the car we drove, if you covered the rear exits and then you just get the side exit. But if you uncover the rear exits, then the thing shoots fireballs out of the exhaust.
That's what I want.
You want.
That's what I want. I mean,
knowing what we know about the owner of that car, the blue car, who's a Japanese guy who's out driving at all hours of the morning, actually only hours of the early morning, every day, basically. It's exactly the car you expect from that kind of driver. But
the car that we drove, the jade green car, was sanitized in its exhaust sound, but beautiful, beautiful. a great shifter in the car. I think you said it was an aftermarket shifter also.
It was an aftermarket shifter. Yeah, it definitely has tighter, narrower throws. And this is the 915 transmission, which people in Carrera 3.2s are like, that's the shitty one. That's the one you don't want. In the Carrera RS, nobody ever complains about it.
Yeah, what's the deal with that? It was fine. It was great.
Yeah, it is fine. They just when they wear out, they get really awful. And I think a lot of people drive ones that are worn out. People are also sort of not used to the fact that like a lot of old cars, there's no spring-loaded centering to the 3/4 axis of the knob. And so once you leave a gear, you kind of have to know approximately where to take the lever to look for the next gear. And then you're not going to get that springing action that centers it on the 3/4 gate that people of modern drivers...
Is there no spring on
nothing.
that?
You would flop it freely when it's in neutral from side to side. It doesn't self-center. Some of the aftermarket ones might actually add self-centering. So I didn't notice whether this one had it. But out of the factory, when these cars were originally delivered, there is nothing. It's like a Beetle. Beetles are like this too. There's no...
They flop around.
Yeah, it just flops around in neutral.
I mean, it's only a 4-speed.
You're not... It's hard to get lost. But with a 5-speed, it's a little bit. So and as the bushings and stuff wear out, there's a shift coupler that's got a rubber thing that when it wears out, you can
coupler.
Shift coupler.
Oh, I thought you said shish like shish kebab coupler.
No, there's a shift coupler that when it wears out, then things get really uncertain in those gearboxes, and so I think a lot of the reputation of those cars, those gearboxes particularly, comes from worn out examples and people slamming them into first gear at 26 miles an hour and all sorts of other unforgivable stuff. But they're really not bad when they're properly sorted and adjusted. Okay.
I hereby lodge my request to drive another Carrera 2.7 RS with the filthy exhaust and stock suspension on it. But
and
as
tires.
And stock size
this had
tires.
very grippy tires on it. Too
grippy. Yeah. And Randy Popes is such a fucking lunatic. It's like, there is no such thing as too much grip. And we looked at the footage. He was on 3 wheels. Come on, Randy, shut the fuck up. I like my 911s to move around a little bit more. That's one of my favorite parts of long hoods. And so this car was fabulous. The engine was like 9 out of 10. I want to experience a stock one with more.
With less tire.
Yep.
Yeah.
So TBD on whether that's my favorite air-cooled 911. Probably will be. But gears were stupid short.
Yes.
Stupid short.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever driven a Porsche and thought, it's geared appropriately. Second gear, if the speedo was accurate, I think it was, could barely tickle 100 kilometers an hour. So barely do 60 miles an hour instead of these friggin' modern 911s that'll do 120 miles an hour in first gear. I loved that. It was a pleasure on the street to just be able to just accelerate normally and bang through 5 gears by the time I'm at a 50 mile an hour speed. Fabulous. Yeah, that was great. Okay.
Chronologically, next is the Mercedes-Benz 300 SD Turbodiesel.
So this is
presented in Inca red, I think is the name of this color.
It's fucking tang orange.
Yeah. Salmon, the inside, not the outside.
Yeah. The inside is biscuit.
No, of the salmon. The inside of the salmon, because you think about BMW salmon, it's silver. It's the outside of the salmon, not the inside of the salmon.
Fair enough. I don't eat salmon. It's disgusting. So I wouldn't know. But
the inside from the outside. Okay, well, there's your problem.
That's my problem. I was eating the wrong part of the salmon. It's a little scaly. The 300 ST Turbo. Magnificent W116.
Yes. The first car that they always say this is the first car that they officially use the term S-Class for, even though it is obviously related to the 280 SE that came before it, just like it is also a 280 SE if it was the 6-cylinder gas one.
What always
surprises
me the most about short wheelbase 116 S-Classes is that they don't have a back seat. Like you're in the back seat, your knees are up against the front driver.
It's not that bad.
It's my Golf has a bigger back seat.
Okay.
Does it not?
I mean, I don't know. It seems fine to me. It's not very tall.
It's fine, but we're spoiled today.
Yes, it's not consistent with your expectations of what an S-Class.
I'm an S-Class, right? Because that car's all hood and then all trunk, and then the passenger, so like most 70s cars.
Safety.
Small. Yeah.
Crumple zones.
This one's really healthy. Yeah. It started on a 39-degree morning with no glow plugs. I did it. I wanted to get audio of it cranking and then being loud. And diesels are loudest when they're cold. And I thought, I'll sneak up to it. And I had the sound guy sneak up to it. Don't tell anyone. And, I got in and shut the door. And I'm like, okay, ready? And turn the key. Straight to the starter. And
no glow plug time at all.
Normally on a worn out old indirect injection diesel like that, you have, in those temperatures, you'd be cranking for 30 seconds before you'd ever get the first fire and it'd be smoking out the back or whatever. And this bugger it was like, and ran perfectly. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So we did that, and you and I did a quarter mile and a half of a standing half mile or 1 mile. So we did a standing mile.
Yes.
Running, not a fast car.
No. But performing in accordance with its original specifications, we confirmed. I think we managed 0 to 60 in 16.
It was 16 and change, but then you pull out rollout and it was 15.8 or 15.9 or something.
A real road burner.
Yeah. You said you buried the needle on the way there for the...
Well, it's a 1980. It has a speed meter
with
speedometer
a peg at 85
that goes to 85 miles an hour only. So but yes, it did achieve 85, which is an impressive achievement given how glacial the acceleration.
I mean, they did a good 100, didn't they?
Probably. I could imagine that.
It was the fastest and most powerful diesel. First of all, it was the world's first ever turbocharged passenger car diesel. It was the world's first 5-cylinder diesel
car.
Yeah, because
Lancia did a 5-cylinder diesel truck in the 50s or something because it's Lancia.
Yeah. My other favorite thing about there is we're going to get down the list in a second. Think back to this moment because we had a bunch of big hitter like performance cars there. The best handling car of the bunch in terms of actual chassis balance was the Mercedes.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's kind of riotous. It's pretty fun.
Are we going to play the video?
Nope.
Yes, we are.
No.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
This is what happens when Jason is in the passenger seat, Derek is in the driver's seat, and the car is owned by a friend of ours who is sick and twisted in all the funnest ways possible. And I know we'll get a big laugh out of this. My teaching to Derek was, just accelerate full throttle and then just have it slam itself. Those Mercedes transmissions did not fuck around when they downshifted. Have it slam down into second gear, which will sort of send a whole torque slug down to the back wheels, lock them up and turn in right as you're doing it. And they'll do a 180.
So we gotta go right, left lift. Floor it. Yeah.
I found this out because Mike, which is another episode we still need to do, my old friend Mike, used to always like downshift and then forget, and he'd be going too quickly and the car would just deny the downshift, but he would leave it there and he'd be just like a minute later or 2 minutes later just totally not paying attention, go to make a right-hand turn like on the city streets and it would slam shift itself back into first and he would just and spin, right? Come to a stop like, God damn it. And so I, of course, use that to my advantage of driving like a moron. Like you can really just even a big lift in second gear or whatever will rotate that big long wheelbase. Well, it's a short wheelbase, but long wheelbase car very beautifully around.
Mm-hmm. It was unexpectedly fun.
Yeah. You can have 100.
Very economical.
Yeah.
And indestructible. But not fast.
Not fast.
Or quick.
But they sound so great. Yeah. And that one, despite the fact that it started, it was clearly a healthy motor, had a bigger lope than most. Actually, it had a bump, 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 bump out the back that, I have never looked at an OM 617 crank, but it has to be a straight 6 crank with a throw missing because...
Or a straight 4 one with a throw added, which I think is actually how the engine was designed.
Well, that was how the engine was designed, but I can't imagine how the hell you do that because then you have 2 cylinders firing at once. But they always have that lope, and this one did a thump, 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 thump out the exhaust. I don't know why, but man, it sounded the part and accelerated and cool.
Somewhat. Accelerated somewhat. Cool car. I like those cars. They're incredibly underrated, very well engineered cars.
Yeah.
Just the first really modern Mercedes, I think.
I'm going to give
107,
140, the real modern.
Well, modern is subjective.
Yes, I guess when you're your age.
Yes. Okay.
Next car
chronologically is probably the Audi Quattro.
Yeah. First time I've driven an Ur-Quattro.
Me too.
Yeah. Really? Okay. Driven plenty of 4000s. Same effective car. Mm-hmm. What a good looking
without
car.
turbocharger.
This
The
was
4000s don't have
4000s,
turbochargers, but the Quattros do.
Great looking car.
Uh-oh, you're starting with the looks.
Great looking car.
Okay.
No. The whole. I mean, how do you not start with the looks of that thing? I mean, it looks a little bit elongated.
Yeah, well, that's why they came out with the short one. That's not why they came out with the short one. They came out with the short one because the long one was too long to do rally things.
Yeah. Would have been nice to have a Sport Quattro there.
Yeah. Which is the short wheelbase one that they homologated specifically so that they could have something that was halfway maneuverable in Group B once everyone else started doing Group B cars. Because when Audi first appeared in Group B, or even before Group B actually, in 81, they were the only ones with the four-wheel drive, and so they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's kind of unwieldy and long wheelbase. It's got so much traction that it just sort of walks away from everybody. When everybody else started using four-wheel drive, then they were like, oh, the bigness of this car is making it not as competitive, so they made a short version of the car.
Chopped a couple inches out of the middle of it. It's kind of hard to believe that that was the genesis of the four-wheel drive passenger car. You had sort of rare exceptions with that Jensen,
Interceptor,
and then
FF, yeah.
AMC Eagle, and that was it in terms of passenger cars with four-wheel drive. I did when writing the script for the Piëch, so I guess clearly when I was writing the script, I did verify one thing: there is not a single manufacturer of cars that sells cars in the United States today that doesn't offer a four-wheel drive car.
Really?
Not one. And I was like, oh, McLaren, forgetting completely the Artura is all-wheel drive. Every single car company that sells a car in America sells an all-wheel drive car, and it started with that car. That's pretty big.
Very impactful.
Yeah. Genius move. I took advantage of Audi's ridiculous layout where the engine's in front of the headlights. But there was a shaft within a shaft that allowed power to be transmitted both to the front, to the diff that was at the front of the transmission, and then out the back again. It had, the early ones were an open diff. They became viscous, I think, later on with some locking.
There was also like a manual lever that you used in the early ones that you would use to lock the diff.
This is really early genesis of four-wheel drive, but it works.
It's a surprisingly clever and functional system, like everybody else. You see the same thing happened with mid-engined cars when they were first making mid-engine street cars, is that everybody kept experimenting with different layouts and configurations in an effort to try and figure out what was best, and that's why you end up with weird stuff like the Miura and the Countach, and then you end up with solutions like the ones we're used to, like the Pantera did. And the same thing happened with four-wheel drive systems. Like Lancia did their own separate thing. Mercedes did this sort of electronically augmented system, first generation 4MATIC, which was kind of junk. The Quattro system, they kept intact for a while and was actually remained sort of one of the better systems, the Torsen system.
Torsen was later.
This is
right?
like 89.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But the layout of it was made possible by the fact that where the engine is, right? That's the hard part for most other manufacturers, is the engine is between the front wheels, and therefore it's very difficult to package a differential there. So BMW had shafts going through the oil pan. Mercedes had shafts going through the springs.
Yes, drive shafts.
They were trying to figure out how to make this work, but Audi's system was fundamentally really strong right off the bat. And it was never meant to be put in for road use. Like that Quattro system was developed just for rallying. And it was so good that they, this was the time, I talked about this in the episode, but Audi had no identity, and they were trying to figure out, Piëch, I guess, was trying to figure out ways to give the company an identity and give BMW and Mercedes customers a reason to buy the car.
Vorsprung durch Technik.
Yeah. And this was a real genuine USP. It was an advantage. No one else had it. And if you wanted to get up your ski slope to your ski house, or
the top of famously the top of a ski jump, which they did in a TV ad.
Yeah, the ads in that, we put the ad in the episode.
Splendid.
Because the ad was based on a stunt that Piëch pulled, where he literally drove the car up at 23% grade, I think it was, on summer tires in front of the board, the Volkswagen board. And it was not to convince them to put the car in production for production. It was just for homologation. Yeah. And I think at some point during that whole thing, when it must have been everyone else was probably helicoptered in and then gone up a gondola or something. And they must have been just gobsmacked when this nitwit pulls up in his Audi and 5 cylinders up the hill. Hey, what's up, motherfuckers? At some point, it must have occurred to them that this could be a huge advantage, both for real world people.
Yeah,
and
it's part of a larger pattern of technical innovation at Audi during this period that became sort of their identity. And that's what Vorsprung durch Technik is. It's about progress through technology, I guess, but making it a technological innovation company. And that's the unique value proposition that Audi offers.
They were the first to galvanize. It was because Piëch was so product focused. The company became, so I love that when the company became focused on technology. And I love that internally they called the Audi R&D Center Palazzo Piëch. So Piëch's Palace. And he was really given a lot of power there because of the innovations that they were making, including the first ever galvanized body.
We're getting off topic. We're supposed to talk about the car.
We're not talking about him. But the car. So the 4000. The Coupe. Turbo 10 valve. The owner of this car had a 20 valve, and I wanted
very
it so
few
bad.
20 valve Ur-Quattros were made because they were only available. The car came out in 1980 at Geneva, and I think probably entered production late 80 or early 81. And the 20 valve didn't come out till 89, I think. And so the majority of them, and all the ones in the US, are 10 valves. There was never a US 20 valve.
This was a US 10 valve. The 20 valve that he said was the 20 valve that he has, I think, is a swap. And
because that engine, the 20 valve, was offered in the 200 starting in 91
in the US. Yeah.
In the US and in the S4.
And we got it in the US in naturally aspirated form in the Audi 90 20 valve
Coupe.
Sedan also
in the Audi 90 Coupe sedan. Both
Audi 90 sedan
and the Audi Coupe
and the
Quattro.
Yes.
Without a turbocharger.
With the turbo is 91 only wagon.
Yes, in the US and the S2.
Anyway, Audi nerdism and more things. That Audi V8 was 2 of those motors sucked down to 4-cylinder, which was actually the same engine that's in my Scirocco.
Yeah,
that 4-cylinder and 5-cylinder were the same thing. It was all Audi stuff. Anyway,
so modular. Interesting.
I guess we'll get to that. The Piëchisode. Car drove well. Car drove very well.
Yeah.
I loved the noise of that car from the outside more so than the inside. That 5-cylinder song is really an exhaust thing.
Yeah.
Got a little harsh on the inside of the car, but not nearly as laggy as I expected it to be because it's not a huge amount of boost. But what I loved about the car is the shifter, which you laughed at me.
Because it feels exactly like the one in your GTI. It's like sort of like a collapsing italicized H. Not GTI, Mark 1 Volkswagens.
I didn't even notice. First of all, totally unrelated transmission. It's longitudinal versus transverse. Different shift link. It's like I think it's a cable in that. I don't even know but the Volkswagens are rods, but apparently it's at an italic, like that.
It's like a melting, collapsing H.
I didn't even notice that. Because of course I wouldn't. I'm driving Mark 1s for years, and if it's similar, whatever. But just I love the look of that shift knob. There's just something really
about
nice
interacting with that car to me gives me a sense of well-being. It's always tinged, of course, by the undertone of like impending failure because it's a vintage Audi, and it reminded me, of course, a lot of my 200, which I really liked, despite the fact that it was kind of a ticking time bomb and a fast track to bankruptcy and the poorhouse. But I really like that car. The feeling of interacting with those cars reminds me a little bit. I mean, I guess all 80s German cars, 80s, 90s German cars are like this. They all in different ways. Mercedes give you this sense of well-being, of course, and BMWs have this rightness to them dynamically. And so all of these cars of this era have a sort of, I don't know, it makes me feel very comfortable and sort of at peace and feeling of joy when I interact with those cars. And this car certainly provided that.
Part of it, I mean, a lot of it's the look and the sound to me. Yeah. I mean, just a really nice car. I was deathly afraid of this car. I think it was going to break and leave us stranded with no part of the episode because I'm burned by Volkswagen Audi products. And of course, it was the one that didn't start and that died and wouldn't restart. And, this car is really nice condition. The owner was a sweetheart of a guy. He was really cool, actually. And he doesn't drive it often. So the battery was pretty weak. So we jumped it a couple times. And then at one point it wouldn't restart. And it had melted its fuel pump fuse. It's just typical. Thank God. I mean, thank God I know CIS fuel injection well enough. I'm like, hang on, fuel pump's not priming. And I just throw a new fuse at it. Boom, it starts. But I just kept walking around fucking Audis. Then I'm like, wait a second, everything here is really an Audi. Shut up.
Yeah.
They're gonna bite you.
We did have so that was easily resolved, but
Yeah.
I don't know, very representative of 80s Audi.
Yeah.
I like those things.
And we skipped right over the 90s in this
Altogether?
car selection. Yeah, because we went straight from Audi Coupe Quattro to Mark IV Golf, which is a big jump. But the reason you'll see in the thing, there's a reason this kind of
TDI.
TDI really did
materialized
start
in 1989, actually, on an Audi. I think it came out in 1989. And so the TDI story, which is the story really of the 90s, was represented by the Mark IV TDI. Right.
And the reason why we did that is because Mark IV was able to represent two different things. TDI was such a success that it gave Piëch keys to the entire Volkswagen group. Where he then was able to create the Mark IV. So that car we were able to combine two things into one. I would have otherwise had to get a Mark III and a Mark IV, and I just didn't think we needed two Golfs. So instead I got two Mark IVs because, I can't help myself. But we first got a TDI. So TDI being turbo direct injection. This is the combination of turbodiesel,
computer
controlled direct injection. And it was really the revolution that diesel needed to be a viable replacement for a gas engine. They were suddenly as powerful as gas engines they could be made to be. But yeah, towards the end, I mean, you had 2-liter 4-cylinder diesels that made 150 horsepower. At the same time, you had 2-liter 4-cylinder gas engines. Of course, once gasoline engines got turbos, TSI and Volkswagen Speed, they became even more powerful. So we had a Mark III TDI there.
Mark IV.
Mark IV TDI there with the Mark III engine, with a 1.9 liter Pumpetuze motor, and it is the loudest fucking thing ever created.
It was immensely charming.
Yeah, I was going to get there in a second. I mean, you couldn't hear the Mercedes diesel over it. Like, they're so much louder. But that thing charmed the pants off of every single person there.
And it had no paint on it and 348,000 miles.
Yeah.
And the thing and it like a little bit of a tune, I guess, on it.
Yeah,
And it was
and a
like
bit of a little bit of a turbo upgrade too.
It was just like zippy and happy and gratifying and joyful. It made me just want to drive everywhere in it.
Yeah.
I was just like, I walked up to it and I was like, what is this heap? And then I like started operating and I was like, okay, this is like, it meant I want one. Like I immediately went and started looking for one to buy.
I love that we had a Bentley, a Veyron, we had a Porsche 27 RS. We had some big cars there. And everyone wanted to drive the XL, not the XL1. We had XL1. Everyone wanted to drive the Mark IV TDI home. That is the perfect outcome that I love, because I wanted that to happen, and I expected everyone to be like, "What is that piece of shit?" Especially this one again, like it was a little bit
Pre-owned.
ridden hard and put away wet.
Never put away because it has 350,000
yeah,
miles.
never stopped being ridden hard. And yeah, it was that car is the perfect example of how to make a charming but refined cruiser, like daily driver.
Yeah, it made me want a daily. It felt like a sort of just thing to rely on, to trust, to enjoy, to make you have some kind of the dieselness of it, the overt dieselness of it, the fact that it wasn't trying to be quieted down the way we tend to do with diesels now. It's very mechanical. You're very aware of it being a car and doing car things.
And its lag.
Yeah.
Days you would shift and it would be like 3 to 5 business days before boosting the next year. But
once it hit, it was quite
swift.
Quick.
Yeah.
But the fact that it spent so much time out of boost means that net it's not fast.
It doesn't matter, right? But there's nothing to me more satisfying. There are more satisfying things. There's one thing I find very satisfying is being in 5th gear at 2,000 RPM and just riding a wave of torque where you can't believe this thing is only pointing to 2, and yet it's accelerating as if it should be screaming.
Yeah.
But super light clutch, super light shifter.
Yes.
Just all this, the perfect cohesiveness of all the controls in Mark IVs, and a stunningly beautiful interior that's just
feels
so
expensive.
well made. Yeah. Which brings us to the other Mark IV, which was a Wookiee.
Actually expensive.
Yeah, that's true. Well, an R32.
Yeah, the R32 in, what is the blue called?
Blue.
True blue.
True blue.
Sonic blue. No, that's a Volvo name for the same color.
No, it's probably, I don't know. That's the right color for an
Yeah,
R32.
it's a very iconic color for that car. Looks a lot like Subaru World Rally Blue.
There's a VR6 head gasket right there, although that's an early 2.8. R32 was the other car there that everyone fell in love with.
Yeah.
Because it just looks the part, it sounds the part, the noises
and the quality also was very surprising. I mean, not very surprising. It's just if you've interacted with a Mark 1 and then you get in a Mark 4 and you're just like, holy shit, like they went from being remedial to being sort of world class.
Look at Mark 3 to Mark 4. I mean, that was...
I don't have much time in a Mark 3.
Well, think Mark 1, only Mexican built and shittier. Yeah.
Really?
Mark 3s were styled well interior-wise. I love the gauges, for example. But it was just all one big piece of plastic. The Mark 3 came out right around when Piëch was given the chairmanship of the entire Volkswagen Group.
January 1st of 93.
93. And Volkswagen was bankrupt. It was, literally months away from closing up shop. And he said shortly after coming on board, I guess it was more than a couple of years later, that he was going to make a Golf compete with Mercedes-Benz. And I remember laughing out loud reading this in Car and Driver years ago. And everyone was like, don't be ridiculous. Volkswagen's never going to make a car better than Mercedes. And Mercedes came out with a 203, which was a low point in Mercedes.
At around the same time that Volkswagen came out with
the Mark IV. And that Mark IV was definitely, without question, nicer inside than that Mercedes C-Class. Not even close.
I mean, that was always the thing that the journalists would extol Audis for in the U.S. also. When Audi experienced this big turnaround in the late 90s, early 2000s, was how gorgeous the interiors were. And you sit in a Mark IV and you're like, this is very clearly, related to the Audis, the Audi interiors that were sort of transformed Audi from a sort of small random, also ran along the lines of like Peugeot and Alfa Romeo in the early 90s into like one of the big three German premium options.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark IV is unbelievable. The joke is that both Mark IV owners were like, it's not perfect Mark IV things. Do you have any idea how lucky you have it? Do you know how good these cars actually are?
Yeah.
Like you want to compare that to a Mark III? When was the last time you saw a Mark III on the road?
I know.
They all gone. They rusted away.
I thought it would be cool to hit a Mark III VR6.
I did. I loved it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cars ever. But it was a pile of shit.
Yeah.
And the suspension was just straight out of Mark 1 and Mark 2. It couldn't deal with the weight of a VR6. They just weren't particular.
They made GTI ones, right? VR6's factory.
Yeah. I made a 4-door. I had a 4-door 2-point slow automatic that I swapped to 5-speed. Mark IVs were the winner of the Piëchisode as far as I'm concerned, because they were just, every naysayer was like, even Anthony, autistic Anthony with his like, this sound, it doesn't sound that good, was like, oh my God, when it started. It sounded like a thing from Idle to Redline.
Yeah. An incredible sense of occasion in such a sort of useful,
little package.
Easy to live with form factor.
Okay, so after Mark IV,
Phaeton.
we go to Phaeton. The first time I've ever even sat in a Phaeton.
Yeah.
You too?
Me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you think?
I wanted to like it more than I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
I guess I thought it was going to feel more expensive than it did. It felt, I guess all of the expense was in the engineering, maybe. It wasn't objectionable, but it didn't like knock me over. I thought I was going to get knocked over by it.
Okay. I was knocked over by it.
Really?
Yeah.
In what respect?
Okay. The interior is a little bit...
It's a little cheap.
It's a little Lexus. You know, Lexus does these huge buttons and they're just not... it reminded me of like I remember the original LS460, which was the sort of anonymous looking LS from like 2010 or 2008. Where the buttons were just kind of big and they were labeled like radio, and it was just it was sexless.
Very literal.
And it was very literal, and it was very like play school, plasticky, whatever. Mm-hmm. Where Mercedes did 221 at the time, which was like, wow, like this is a
curvaceous,
and
emotional,
sensual, and materials and like textures and shit like this. This is all gray.
Yeah.
But I did learn that the most impressive part of that interior is that car had 70,000 miles on it. That interior had 250,000 miles on it from a different car. that blew my mind because there was no wear on anything.
Really?
And I was like, okay, so it may not look sexy, but it was certainly really good, high quality stuff. So you get in it and you start it and you're like, this is a lot of like Audi, very familiar sort of Volkswagen Group Audi stuff. And the back seat of that car, so this was a 4-passenger, like a 4-place.
With a full center console in the back.
It was pretty fucking
Yeah. I mean, that was the place anytime that, you were, I don't know, recording voiceover and I needed to be quiet or something, then I would go in the Phaeton and sit in the back of the Phaeton for sure. It was the place to be.
It's spectacular with its old, its own little control pod or whatever.
Yeah.
All of that was well and good. And then driving up and down the runway, Randy was a little bit excited about revving it out. And the scene in the video.
This is, by the way, a W12.
This is a W12, yeah. The scene in the video is me in the back and Randy driving. And the thing that I noticed the most is that high revs over 4,000 RPM, that original W12 gets pretty coarse. And that was the case in all the W12 cars until the Urus, which is where Bentley debuted a brand new, all new Bentayga, sorry. Yeah, same car. Too bad.
Yeah, but there was no 12-cylinder Urus, which was an impressive achievement for it.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking back to the head-to-head I did with Johnny, and it was Bentayga versus Model X. But in my mind, it's very easy to confuse. They're all the same freaking car. But that Bentayga debuted a brand new W12 that was that they had smoothed out tremendously. And so from the back seat, I was like, okay, it rides really well. We're on a runway that was really bumpy. And it felt okay, and the engine felt a little coarse up top and whatever. When I got that on a real road in real conditions with 4 people in the car, it was spectacular.
Really?
It is easily the smoothest powertrain I have ever experienced in any car ever. The shifts were genuinely imperceptible. You could have deleted the tachometer and told me that thing had 1 gear and it was just somehow going, and I would have believed you. Like you just watch it. The shifts, it's a 5 HP ZF automatic. It's only a 5-speed. But you'd watch the tach drop pretty slowly in between. None of this, like modern shit. Just drop slowly. And you say, how the hell did this thing just go from 2,200 RPM to 1,400 RPM? And I literally couldn't hear or feel it. Easily the smoothest. And at those revs, no vibrations. Mind-blowing. And the ride quality was out of this world.
Now I wish I had experienced it on the road instead of on the runway.
You did, because the next car that we're going to talk about, we're just going to jump ahead, was that fucking Bentley.
Oh.
On those same roads.
Well, that was considerably worse.
Yeah. We had a Bentley Conti GT Speed W12, which is the last of the W12s. And you and I rode on that road, and I'm like, so what do you think? And I just didn't say anything, and you said...
it seems very harsh for a Bentley.
Yeah. It was a ride most unbecoming of a Bentley, and sound levels.
Yeah.
Now,
and not like engine sound. I'm talking, you're talking about like road noise and tire noise, and not so much wind noise, mostly road and tire noise.
And impact.
Yes,
impacts
and
are harsh as shit.
Yeah, which is like exactly the thing you think a Bentley should be really good at, is sort of like oozing over road and peasants and sort of insulating you from the real world. That's what you do with a car like that. And it was like so it had sort of the minuses of a performance car, and then the back seat was like barely sufficient for an average sized adult with no legs.
With no legs. Yeah.
And the trunk wasn't terribly large either. In
its defense, this is a Speed, right? So it gets rid of the leather cloth seats, which is so cool in a Bentley. It didn't have any wood. It was all metal trim. And this is, 22-inch rims. Yeah. It's there for performance. Yeah. And it certainly does. It's also a Panamera underneath. It's no longer a Phaeton underneath, like the old ones were. It has the moves. On a bumpy, on a twisty road, wow, does it have? It has no body roll whatsoever. Really? It's got 48-volt anti-roll bars.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful chassis balance. It is predominantly rear drive feeling when you're starting to add power in. I will say what I discovered was that it's a 10 out of 10 under 10 tenths. As soon as you start sliding it around, it falls completely apart. It has no idea what to do.
And that's based on programming, or is it a dynamic shortcoming?
No, it's based on programming, because I'm sure I haven't really slid a Panamera around, but I've slid every other Porsche ever around, and they're always amazing. And this is just a matter of, did the Bentley chassis team
tread in that neighborhood at all.
Yeah.
Or they just reach the limit and they're like, okay, very good, everybody go home.
Yeah. I mean, and you could slide the thing around, at 9.9 tenths around a corner, where there's barely any understeer, if at all, and any throttle rotates it beautifully. It's spectacular. But once you try to drift it around something, it doesn't know where to send the power.
Well, Bentley sales will doubtless plummet as a result of that.
But like the transmission
condemnation
would start to slip, and then it would throw an error, and it would lock itself in neutral, and it would cut power, and it would freak the fuck out. So it's really funny to see that this can be a Panamera underneath, and it's great up until 9.999, and then as soon as you hit the absolute limit, it falls completely apart, and it's a Bentley. All right, that's not a criticism.
Anticipate that people are who buy those cars are going to be hanging out in that regime.
Correct. But what it did do was bang out. Hold on, you and I did an acceleration run. Did it bang out a 3-second flat 0 to 60?
Probably, yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
Or 2.9 or 3.0. It was. Yeah. I think it was 2.99 is what it was. 2.99.
I was going to say 2.98, but
yeah, it is
good enough.
Very, very quick in a straight line. But it had none of the ride quality that the Phaeton had.
Yes, which are obviously opposite ends of the mission spectrum. I mean, you would have to compare it against a Flying Spur, right? I guess, with no sporting intent.
Yeah, should have been. I mean, this is the price you pay for fashion with those wheels and tires. But that was when the Phaeton
the speed
started.
model. Yes.
Yeah. That's where the Phaeton just really showed its strength. Like, wow, here's an old car that has a structure that's so stiff. It, everything rattled on the car. In fact, like it was on those really bad sections of road.
Which car?
Even the Phaeton. And that's when I didn't even say anything, and the owner was like, "Oh, by the way, I swapped that interior in," and I'm like, "Aha! Now I know why it rattled, because there's no way that these cars, I'm sure, ever rattled. There was one horrendous rattle, like from the front left corner of the car. I'm like, okay, it's a 250,000 mile interior that was swapped into a different car. Of course, it's going to be rattles. Phaeton was really cool on the road. You got to drive a W12, not in anger. Just like a chauffeur would, and wow.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. What's next? Conti. No, Veyron.
Veyron and the XL1. Those are the ones that remain.
Yeah. Okay. Veyron. We didn't just get a Bugatti Veyron. We got
the
Scoo body Veyron.
The one that is probably one of the most viewed on YouTube Veyron in the world. Probably.
Yeah. The Veyron that was driven into the Galveston Bay.
Bay.
Saltwater Lagoon.
Yes.
Saltwater. Like, that's nuts.
For 7 years.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't in there for 7 years.
No, but it was 7 years before it was reconstituted. So it was just hanging out, marinating in salt for 7 years.
I think the story is that it wound up at the lawyer of the guy who drove into the Bay wound up going to the prison for insurance fraud because he had insured the shit out of it, and then tried to claim it as I was avoiding a pterodactyl or something, some ridiculous story. A guy named a YouTuber actually named Houston Crosta, who lives in Las Vegas and has a car rental business, let us use it. He just spent the last X amount of months, years. Resurrecting the car at great expense with a lot of videos of it. And little did I know. Would you like to guess how many shakedown miles he did from the time the thing left the lake until the time that we drove the fucking doors off the car? Would you like to know how many miles it traveled?
1.
No, don't be ridiculous.
0.
From lake to our runway, you saw what we did with it. You were in the car when we drove it. The first thing we did was drive it to the gas station 10 miles away.
16?
Yeah, 5.
5?
I thought he had been driving. I was told incorrectly that Houston had been driving the car for the last couple of months. And then, it's like all the YouTube stuff is delayed. And because he, like, while we were filming, he's rolling out it first started and it first drove. No, he's like, I drove it like once. One time at like 20 miles an hour, I drove it to such and such. And then I did one pull when it was still in rear drive because we were working on the front diff. That's it. And because we got it back and we put like 160 miles on the car. And he had said, and I quote, and I have all my production crew backing me up because I'm like, am I crazy? He said in the call, do whatever the fuck you want to it. Drive the shit out of it. Like, he kept saying that. We're like, okay, sure, fine, no problem. And we did. I mean, we didn't damage it. We didn't beat the shit out of it. But I did one bitty little slide for the intro. And then we did one slide in the credit sequence at the end. And the rest of the time, we were moving. I mean, it was... Dude, what
It was very good in light of that.
You and I first got in, and the first thing we noticed was like a squeak. There was some like horrendous squeak up front. That went away. Huh. It like fixed itself. And there were a bunch of other little...
Probably just getting the salt out.
Yeah. There were a bunch of other little teething stuff that was happening because they hadn't driven the car yet. But it put up with 100 and something miles of us filming, and it wasn't like...
No, it was very fine. Functional. Yeah.
Well, other than check engine light,
plenty of beans.
Yeah. Other than it had all of them. Other than check engine light, that Houston warned me. He's like, I broke something putting the. I didn't even ask what it was. I didn't want to know. He's like, I broke something putting the rear clamshell on. It's fine. I'm like, okay. And then we had one morning it didn't want to start because we weren't pressing the brake pedal down hard enough. Brake pedal switch was misaligned. I found out that was the real reason. You got it.
Yeah, everyone was like, you can't get it to start. And I was like, I got it and it started immediately.
Yeah, it didn't for me. Whatever. It was fine. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
The car is spectacularly purple.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily purple and extraordinarily orange.
It is. I in photos... I will confess, I hope Houston doesn't watch this, I thought it was fucking terrible. And then I saw it in person. And I completely changed my mind.
Oh, really?
Oh, I love it.
I did not change my mind.
Really?
I thought it was unbecoming. What I didn't think was unbecoming was the noise.
Oh, my God. Veyrons don't usually sound like that.
No, I guess it had some kind of absurd titanium exhaust on it. He made it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, it was very nice.
The
Beautifully
Veyrons
turned out.
Yeah, they sound typically like a whoosh.
Yeah.
If anything, you hear a lot of turbo noises always.
Yeah.
And the exhaust is just sort of white noise. There's so much going on. It's
kind of roary, but yeah.
Chiron's sound a lot better. Chiron's sound like something where Veyron's... This was by far and away the best sounding Veyron I've ever driven. Yeah. And it was...
it sounded great.
It sounded great.
It was a pleasure. Very loud, but like in a great way.
It was one of those cars that's so loud, but you don't... It's not obnoxious, so you don't realize it. Like there's one point when it was just sitting there
I think in the real world... It probably would have been obnoxious. You know, if you're driving around in an urban environment and there's people around here in the broad expanses of 200-foot wide, literally the runways are 200 feet wide there, and 7,000 feet long. Like the noise is sort of appropriate for this vastness. But I think in the real world, it would probably be a little bit
I'm going to disagree with you because for only one reason. I see what you're saying, and I think it would be fucking insanely loud in the real world, especially given there's one point... I don't think you were there that last day when we filmed the credit sequence, but Randy took off in the car, and I don't know why we had him driving it. Oh, I had flippers on. So I was, of course, making fun of the fact that the car was underwater and I had a scuba mask on and flippers. And I need to just hop in the car and drive away really quickly. I'm like, God, fucking Randy, you do it. Because I was freezing. I was putting my clothes back on. And he floored it and left a little bit sideways and went down the runway. And he was going at least 70 miles an hour.
On a runway.
It doesn't matter. We were 17, 18 miles an hour at the top of fourth gear, and we could hear him clear as day. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, he's probably a mile away. And it was clear as day. But the reason I don't think it would be obnoxious is it's a wall of white noise. And so there was one point it was running and we're all sitting there talking and we're like all kind of yelling really loud and everyone's talking whatever. And it's no one is going, God, shut that fucking thing off the way you do if there's something sitting there. Ah! Sorry for all the audience. I'm going to blow this out.
And me.
It's just this white noise that's just like background noise. Like you're in a city, you don't realize how loud it is.
Yeah.
And I think a car like that, because it's hitting every frequency from 2 hertz to 20,000, is just a wall of white noise, and it wouldn't be obnoxious. A single note is obnoxious. I would love to hear that car in like Manhattan,
somewhere with buildings for the sound to bounce off of. I think the public would be less interested.
Fuck them. You're in a Veyron, a purple Veyron. That's an amazing purple Veyron. That's right. Okay, last car, XL1.
XL1, which we have covered in detail. Covered in detail in a Revelation.
But you drove it now?
I did drive it now, yeah.
And?
I love the steering. My first impression of the steering is funny. Liv was like, does this car have power steering? The producer, because she was moving it. And we were like, no, it doesn't, because it has bicycle tires. But the steering is great. I mean, it just, you experience it and you're just like, it's so like natural and unassisted, and just even with something which obviously has not any overt sporting intent, was so
sporty,
just pleasurable to interact with, gratifying. It feels really extraordinary and special in almost every respect. Everything about that car, I mean, you walk up to it and it looks so... And no image that I've seen really captures this, but it really does look like a little bubble, you know, and it's very small and narrow, and
It's tiny.
Almost every aspect of interacting with the car, door handles, mirrors, window winders, everything about it. The shifter be accepted from that because it's a regular Volkswagen Mark 7 shifter.
Yeah.
But almost every aspect of interacting with the car, the noises and sort of when it does and doesn't make noise, because it's a hybrid. Sometimes it's doing diesel stuff and sometimes it's not. It's all just really like special, which is peculiar for a car of that mission. But it is kind of strangely a gearhead's car, despite being you know, the opposite of an enthusiast car in the sort of conventional...
In the traditional sense, I guess, yeah. I would have one. Yeah. I would love to own that car.
Did you know they made them in dark red, metallic?
I just saw a picture of that.
I saw one in Switzerland a couple weeks ago.
It is... there's one that's coming up for auction, and I'm like, I can't import it, and I can't afford it, but I would really... oh, my God. It's
pretty
stunning.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little bit partial to the white and the silver because it's such a spaceship that I kind of almost think it shouldn't have a color. It should speak for itself. But like the white is the first color that I ever saw, that I ever interacted with an XL1 in. So that's the color I'd probably buy. But that red, gorgeous. Yeah. What, you know, other than it being loud inside and buffety, it's really loud.
Yes, it's very loud. It has that sort of makes all the normal carbon fiber chassis noises of sort of miscellaneous thunking and thudding and sort of like vaguely sort of rattliness to it. And then, like, heaven forbid if you ever try to drive it with the windows open, you will, you know,
blow yours out. I mean,
truly,
it's bad.
Yeah.
But it's got AC. Other than it not having a backup camera, it's kind of a perfect example of itself. I mean, it's exactly it's so.
It's incredibly singular. Yeah. There's nothing like you can't say that it's really like anything else. Like I wouldn't know what to describe it as. The other thing about it that's, you know, in some respects it vaguely reminds you of an exotic car because of the carbon fiber chassis and sort of the dimensions and the doors and all that stuff. Yeah. And then obviously in other ways it's very much not at all.
Like it is new Beetle gauge cluster.
Yeah, it is. We did drag race it against the 300 SD, and it is decisively faster than
with
the
a dead
300
battery.
SD. That's right. It did not have any electric charge at that time. And what was the factory quoted 0 to 100K time on that car? I remember we
12, but we did it was in the 10s with a dead battery.
Get like 10.9 something, which it was a real road burner actually, compared to a 300 SD,
which was a very healthy one as we discussed.
Yeah.
I wish I could have a XL1.
Hell of a daily driver.
No, not without
a rear camera.
Not without the rear camera. It's really, I mean, the car it's half the width of an Elise. You know, visually, it's so little. Yeah. It's a little bit intimidating driving that thing on the street, and the mirror situation is a bit of a problem, but the backup camera situation is a non-starter. I couldn't daily that car, as much as it would be amazing to do. I would do it. Would you really?
Yeah, I'd figure it out. I'd make it work.
I mean, I'd love to be able to. I'm sure you could put a backup camera in it. It's very simple.
Yeah. But that was incredibly... What it felt like, it was this very discordant experience for me because in some respects it feels like a concept car in that it's so sort of like conceptual.
Okay.
Well, it feels like a set of ideas that would not ever make it into a production car.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it feels like a concept car, but in another respect, you know, concept cars are usually just hurriedly thrown together in order to be on a show stand and viewed, you know, by large numbers of people at a distance, not closely. And this has sort of production level values, basically, in terms of how it's turned out. That is so strange for a concept car because it's not a concept car. And so that discord between it being a concept car but also being like a full-on production car turned out to production car standards was really kind of hard on my brain.
Yeah, and not just regular production car standards, but Piëchian.
Yes, right. So like just fantastic, world-class.
The fit and finish on the car is literally perfect. Yeah. Like the paint is perfect. The door hinges are works of art. And because the way the doors are open, the gas struts are on display. They're machined, billet, gorgeous. I mean, it's ridiculous in a way that
in an economy car, allegedly.
Yeah. I mean, $130,000
fuel economy car,
not economy car. I get it. Yeah. Magnificent car. I am so appreciative to the owner that he let us borrow that.
It's so singular. Like, I mean, what is it vaguely close to?
Honda Insight GM EV1.
GM EV1.
I mean,
the quality of a '90s GM product can't.
No,
be.
that was and you know, that was all electric, and this is, you know, it's the closest in philosophy probably to an Insight. Well, the Insight was amazing because we had an Insight next to it in the studio, and they are fairly close in size because the Insight's tiny. Not close in size, but closer than it is to most other cars. They weigh the same. I weighed them both here, which is one of my favorite things to do, is to pull the bullshit card and weigh them. They weighed within 100 pounds of each other, 60 pounds of each other. And the Insight is, you know, it was built in the NSX plant, like, you know, and the S2K plant. It's a special thing made out of aluminium, and it's typical Honda. How do you get the most with the least? And then, you know, typical Volkswagen, how do you get the most with the most? To see those two cars next to each other with both of them, their teardrop shape. Yeah. To realize that Honda got 67 miles per gallon or whatever it was out of, it got 3/4 of the way there, right? I mean, if you look at real world actual fuel economy, it's like 65 for the Honda versus 75 for the XL1. But the Honda had like a naturally aspirated 3-cylinder with nothing.
Right, and they sold them in reasonable numbers, and they were cheap, reasonably priced.
Yeah, I love that comparison between the two cars. But that could be a separate episode. We got to be done now because we have to stop recording and then start again while I'm definitely not still sick next week for the next week's episode, which you gonna change your shirt, or are you just gonna
I'll do it. Sure.
Okay, so Derek's gonna change his shirt, and we'll be back next week with the actual, finally, long awaited, much maligned
and lamented
Ferdinand Piëchisode. Join us next week. Can't wait. I'll be coughing then too. This episode is sponsored by NyQuil.